Tonight we begin with the escalation that US and Israeli military planners had anticipated, tracked and prepared for over the preceding week. An escalation that developed not over months of diplomatic maneuvering, but in a single 24-hour window, 24 hours that saw more than 80 Israeli fighter jets conduct strikes in the Iranian capital, 24 hours that brought Iranian missile salvos toward Israel, 24 hours that prompted air defense systems across the Gulf region to activate from Dubai to Manama to Doha. What the Israeli military announced Saturday morning represented a shift that defense officials in Washington had been monitoring since the conflict entered its second day. A shift from targeted strikes on military infrastructure to what the Israel Defense Forces described as dismantling underground command centers in the heart of Tehran. When that shift occurred, Iran's leadership responded. They responded with missile launches toward Israel, with drone attacks on positions in Kuwait, and with statements from their president suggesting third-party mediation efforts had begun. Let me explain what happened and what it means. According to CBS News reporting from March 7, 2026, what began 8 days ago as a coordinated military operation between the United States and Israel has evolved into a multi-front conflict that now involves Iranian retaliatory strikes across at least 12 countries in the region. The operation, which U.S. Central Command has designated Operation Epic Fury, opened on February 28, with strikes that, according to multiple sources who spoke with CBS News, killed approximately 40 Iranian officials, including reportedly Iranian Defense Minister Amir Nasirzadeh and Revolutionary Guard Commander Mohammad Pakpour. Among those killed on that first day was Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, a development that immediately raised questions about succession and command authority within Iran's government. What followed over the subsequent week, according to data compiled by CBS News in collaboration with the Institute for the Study of War, was a sustained campaign. As of Friday, March 6, U.S. forces had struck more than 3,000 targets. 43 Iranian vessels have been either damaged or sunk. On the ground, 27 military bases and missile launch sites have been targeted, along with 5 government command facilities and 2 nuclear research facilities. But the conflict has not remained contained to Iranian territory. According to official statements from Gulf governments, Iran has launched retaliatory strikes across the region. The United Arab Emirates reported intercepting 9 ballistic missiles and more than 100 drones, though some ordnance did impact within UAE territory, resulting in civilian casualties. Qatar's defense ministry announced it had successfully intercepted a drone targeting the Al Udeid airbase, the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East, housing between 8,000 and 10,000 American personnel. Saudi Arabia intercepted 3 drones east of Riyadh, and Kuwait experienced sirens across the capital after Iran's army claimed to have launched attack drones toward U.S. positions there. Does this suggest a coordinated Iranian response across multiple fronts? The pattern of strikes hitting Gulf Cooperation Council members, all of which host U.S. military personnel or facilities, would appear to indicate a strategic approach rather than random retaliation. The human toll, according to figures cited by CBS News, includes more than 1,200 fatalities in Iran reported by that country's health ministry. In Israel, at least 10 people have been killed by projectiles that penetrated air defenses. In Lebanon, where Israel has conducted more than 500 strikes against Hezbollah targets, the Lebanese health ministry reports at least 217 killed and nearly 800 wounded. The Norwegian Refugee Council estimates that more than 300,000 people in Lebanon have been displaced. What began as a strike on Iranian leadership has, in 8 days, become a regional conflict with humanitarian consequences that extend well beyond the initial military objectives. According to data compiled by the CBS News data team in coordination with government estimates, visual verification, and the Institute for the Study of War, the scale of operations across the first 7 days reveals a conflict of significant geographic and military scope. As of 5 p.m. Eastern Time on March 6, U.S. Central Command reported that American forces had struck more than 3,000 targets. 43 Iranian naval vessels have been either damaged or sunk, a figure that, if accurate, represents a substantial portion of Iran's conventional naval capability. One U.S. military video released Thursday showed what CENTCOM described as an Iranian drone carrier, roughly the size of a World War II-era aircraft carrier, on fire after being struck. On land, the targeting has focused on Iran's military infrastructure. According to CBS News data, 27 military bases and missile launch sites have been hit, including at least 200 individual launchers. 5 government leadership and command facilities have been struck, along with 4 defense industrial sites and 2 nuclear research facilities. The Israel Defense Forces announced Friday that it had destroyed an underground bunker in Tehran that had been intended for use by Iran's leadership, a mission that involved more than 50 fighter jets and 100 munitions. But to understand the full scope of this conflict, one must look beyond Iran's borders. According to the data, Iranian retaliatory strikes have hit at least 12 US and allied military installations across the region. Energy facilities and vessels have been struck 6 times. 4 embassies or consulates have been targeted. Civilian infrastructure has also been affected. The data shows strikes on 6 airports across 5 countries, 4 civilian facilities including at least 3 hotels and 3 commercial ships. The human dimension of this military data is reflected in casualty figures. According to Iran's health ministry, more than 1,200 people have been killed within the country over the 8-day period. The Lebanese health ministry reports at least 217 killed and nearly 800 wounded in that country, where Israel has conducted more than 500 strikes. In Israel, the Independent Institute for National Security Studies reports at least 10 fatalities from projectiles that penetrated air defenses, plus 3 additional deaths in related incidents. UNICEF has stated that approximately 180 children have been killed, calling it a stark reminder of the brutality of war and violence on children. What do these numbers tell us about the strategic situation? First, the geographic dispersion of Iranian retaliatory strikes hitting targets from Kuwait to Dubai to Qatar to Saudi Arabia suggests that despite significant damage to its military infrastructure, Iran retains the capability to project force across the region. Second, the continued launch of missiles and drones, including the Friday salvo toward Israel and the claimed drone attacks on US positions in Kuwait, indicates that Iranian forces remain operational even after more than 3,000 strikes against them. However, Israeli officials stated Friday that the joint operations have achieved near-complete air superiority over Iran, claiming that more than 80% of Iran's air defense systems have been destroyed. If accurate, this would represent a significant shift in the operational environment, one that would allow for continued strikes with reduced risk to aircraft. The question now becomes one of sustainability. How long can both sides maintain this operational tempo, and what happens when critical capabilities are exhausted? As the 8th day of the conflict began, the public statements from key actors revealed sharply divergent positions, but it is the actions behind those statements that may matter more. According to CBS News reporting, President Trump posted on Truth Social Friday that there will be no deal with Iran except UN conditional surrender. In a subsequent phone interview with Axios, the president clarified that this demand might not require a formal declaration from Tehran. Unconditional surrender could be that they announce it, but it could also be when they can't fight any longer, because they don't have anyone or anything to fight with, he told the outlet. Later, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt offered her own interpretation, when he, as Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Armed Forces, determines that Iran no longer poses a threat to the United States of America and the goals of Operation Epic Fury have been fully realized, then Iran will essentially be in a place of unconditional surrender, whether they say it themselves or not. The Iranian response came through multiple channels. President Masoud Pezeshkian claimed on social media that some countries have begun mediation efforts, though he provided no details about which nations or what form those efforts might take. Let's be clear, we are committed to lasting peace in the region, yet we have no hesitation in defending our nation's dignity and sovereignty, he wrote. Meanwhile, on the streets of Tehran, thousands marched after Friday prayers, waving Iranian flags and chanting, "We'll fight, we'll die, we won't accept humiliation." Between these opposing public positions, Russia has emerged as a complicating factor. According to 3 sources, including a senior US official who spoke with CBS News, Moscow is providing intelligence to Iran regarding US positions in the Middle East. Kremlin press secretary Dmitry Peskov confirmed Friday that Russia's government is in dialogue with representatives of the Iranian leadership and will continue that dialogue. When asked about these reports, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt responded, "It clearly is not making a difference with respect to the military operations in Iran because we are completely decimating them." Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, in an interview airing Sunday on 60 Minutes, stated that President Trump is well aware of who's talking to who and that anything that shouldn't be happening, whether it's in public or back-channeled, is being confronted and confronted strongly. European leaders have struck a more cautious tone. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz warned that the conflict must not lead to the collapse of the Iranian state, saying he does not want to see a Syrian scenario in Iran. An endless war is not in our interest. The same applies to a collapse of Iranian statehood or proxy conflicts fought on Iranian soil, he stated. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres warned that the situation could spiral beyond anyone's control and called for serious diplomatic negotiations. Watch the actions, not just the words. While President Trump speaks of unconditional surrender, U.S. defense contractors, including Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing and Raytheon, met with the president Friday, agreeing to quadruple production of certain weapon systems. While Iranian officials mention mediation efforts, their military continues to launch drones and missiles at U.S. positions in Kuwait and allied installations across the Gulf. While Russia's government publicly calls for a cessation of hostilities, intelligence reportedly continues flowing to Tehran. And while European leaders warn against state collapse, NATO has increased its alliance-wide ballistic missile defense posture after intercepting a missile targeting Turkey, a NATO member. The gap between what is said and what is done may ultimately determine how this conflict evolves. Over the past 8 days, we have witnessed a conflict that began with targeted strikes on Iranian leadership and rapidly expanded into a multi-front regional engagement. According to CBS News reporting, U.S. forces have struck more than 3,000 targets. 43 Iranian vessels have been damaged. Iranian retaliatory strikes have reached at least 12 countries, and the human toll, more than 1,200 in Iran, hundreds in Lebanon, casualties in Israel, and civilian deaths across the Gulf continues to mount. As of this recording, the situation remains highly fluid. Israeli officials state that operations are proceeding according to plan, but acknowledge that achieving their objectives may take time. U.S. Central Command continues to report ongoing strikes. Iran's military, despite significant damage to its air defense systems and naval assets, maintains the capability to launch missiles and drones at regional targets. Russia's reported provision of intelligence to Tehran adds an additional layer of complexity to an already crowded battle space. What comes next? Analysts are considering several possible trajectories. The first scenario involves continued military pressure until Iran's capacity to project force is sufficiently degraded that its leadership, whoever that leadership now is, accepts terms. This is the path implied by President Trump's demand for unconditional surrender, though White House statements suggest this could be determined unilaterally rather than through formal declaration. A second scenario envisions a prolonged conflict of attrition. As Robert Pape, a political scientist who has studied air campaigns for 3 decades, told CBS News, for over a century, states have been trying to topple regimes with air power alone, and I'm choosing my words carefully, it has never worked. He warned that we are heading toward the predictable result of growing risk, growing escalation. A third possibility involves third-party mediation. Iranian President Pezeshkian's claim that some countries have begun mediation efforts suggests diplomatic channels may be active, though no details have emerged about who might broker such talks or what terms could be acceptable to either side. The question that remains unanswered is not whether the military operations will continue. They will. The question is what happens when the initial objectives have been achieved. Does this conflict end with negotiated terms, settle into a prolonged campaign, or expand further as regional actors are drawn in? We'll continue monitoring this situation closely.